Welcome to another bonus edition of the MTB Podcast, a segment of the weekly episode that I call Afterthoughts. This is my favorite part of these weekly presentations because it gives me a chance to dig a little deeper into something that came up during the main episode. It allows us to take a single idea and stretch it out a little further, kind of like bread dough, but with fewer carbs and a little more introspection. So as a brief recap, in this week's main episode, we talked a lot about the importance of choosing your values on purpose, not just inheriting them and assuming they're right. And that got us thinking about a bigger question that's honestly kind of unsettling if you sit with it for too long. How much of what you believe is truly yours? Like, did you choose it or did it just kind of happen to you? Now, let's be real. None of us popped out of the womb with a fully formed moral framework and a carefully considered worldview. We absorb a lot from our surroundings without even realizing it. Culture, religion, family, society, all of it hands us a set of ideas before we even know how to spell the word idea. And to be fair, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives us a framework to function in a very complicated world. Imagine trying to figure out everything from scratch. No thanks. But here's the deal. Those inherited beliefs are only meant to be a starting point, not a final destination. At some point, we have to pause and ask, do these beliefs still serve me? Are they even mine? And do they line up with who I want to be? That's what we're digging into today. As Carl Jung would say, how to start making the unconscious conscious. Not in some spooky late-night Ouija board kind of way, but in a grounded, real-life way that can help us build a values-based life that actually makes sense. Okay, so let's start by talking about inherited beliefs. Now, I don't mean your grandma's old casserole recipe, although depending upon what's in it, that could also be something worth examining. What I mean are the ideas and assumptions we pick up as kids, whether it's about life in general, morality, gender, success, family, purpose, the whole menu. Most of these messages are so baked into our environment that we don't even notice them. And they come from our parents, our religious communities, our school systems, the media we consume, and sometimes even the books we read or the jokes we hear. It's everything from boys don't cry to money equals success, or good people go to heaven to real adults should own a house. We pick this stuff up long before we have the tools to question it. And often we just carry it forward. Now, to be fair, there's a reason these beliefs get passed down. They give us structure. If we had to stop and evaluate every single decision from scratch, we'd never make it out the door in the morning. These inherited beliefs also create sort of a social cohesion. They give us a common language, a baseline for behavior, and even a sense of belonging, which can be absolutely critical. So in that way, they're kind of like mental shortcuts. They're useful in moderation. Because here's the catch. Shortcuts aren't always the best route. Sometimes they lead us straight into the weeds or a dead end. The downside to inherited beliefs is that they can go unquestioned for years, even decades. We start to treat these inherited beliefs like they're universal truths instead of the culturally specific guidelines that they really are. And when that happens, we can unintentionally hurt ourselves or others. For example, maybe you grew up being taught that hard work is the only thing that determines success. That sounds noble, right? But what happens when you realize there are systems in place that make it harder for some people to succeed, no matter how hard they work? Or maybe you were raised with rigid ideas about gender roles, And now you're stuck wondering why you feel so uncomfortable in your own skin, or why your relationships feel more like performances than partnerships. The point is, what worked or seemed to work for your grandparents or great-grandparents might not actually serve you very well at all. And it might not have even served them. Sometimes tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. So if we want to live lives that actually reflect who we are and what we believe, we have to be willing to examine the beliefs we've inherited. Not just blindly accept them, but not just rebel against them either. We have to pause, ask questions, and then figure out what's actually true and helpful for us, here and now. Okay, so let's say we've started questioning some of the beliefs we inherited. Awesome first step. Now comes the real work, figuring out what we actually believe in. And this is where core values come in. Core values are your internal compass. They're the non-negotiables that guide your decisions and behaviors, especially when life gets messy. Think of them like the code you want to live by. They could be words like compassion, integrity, honesty, justice, growth, courage, curiosity. They don't all need to be fancy or philosophical. If kindness or humor makes your top 5, hey, that's legit. But here's the thing. You don't automatically have good core values just because you claim them. They have to be sort of chosen on purpose and then tested to make sure they actually hold up in the real world. Not all values are good or moral. Some people will tell you their core values are things like loyalty, strength, or tradition. And while those can be good in the right context, they can also be used to justify some really harmful shit, like loyalty to a corrupt leader, or strength at the expense of kindness and compassion, or tradition that excludes or oppresses certain people. Having values isn't the goal. Having ethical values is. So how do you figure out what your actual values are? Not the ones you inherited, not the ones you say you believe in, but the ones that actually guide your actions. Well, start by reflecting on your emotional highs and lows. Seriously, think about a moment in your life when you felt deeply satisfied, proud, or at peace. What value was being honored in that moment? Was it fairness, connection, creativity? Then flip the script. Think about a moment that made you angry or disappointed. Well, what value got stepped on? Maybe you felt dismissed in a conversation. Well, that might reveal that you value respect or authenticity. Maybe someone betrayed your trust. Boom, you might be realizing just how much you value honesty. Another way to figure it out is to ask yourself, what matters to me more than being right? What's more important than being liked or admired or even comfortable? Because when you find a value that you're willing to defend, especially when it costs you something, well, you're getting close to something real. And if you're thinking, wow, this feels like a therapy session, well, good. It's healthy to get introspective once in a while. You're not chiseling these values into stone tablets. You're just starting to notice what's already driving your decisions. And then you're asking if that's what you want to be driving your decisions. Because once you start naming and testing your values, everything else starts to come into focus. So let's say you've done some digging and you've named a few core values that actually reflect who you want to be. Awesome. Okay, but now what? Well, now comes the part that's not always fun. but it's definitely where the magic happens. And that's realignment. Because sometimes our values and our beliefs, they don't quite match. And when that happens, things can feel off. Maybe it shows up as guilt or defensiveness or just that vague discomfort you can't quite put your finger on. You're just out of sorts. It's like believing in equality, but then realizing, you support a policy or a politician that undermines equality. Or saying you value compassion, but then catching yourself judging someone based on a stereotype. Right? That internal friction, that's your mind and your heart trying to have a conversation. And this is where the phrase making the unconscious conscious really comes into play. We all carry internal programming. Some of it's very helpful, some of it less so. A lot of that programming came from our upbringing, from our culture, our religion, just the environment we were raised in. And it runs in the background, usually without us knowing about it. And sometimes, unfortunately, it ends up being like an outdated app that eats up way too much of your phone's battery life. So how do we bring it to light? Well, pay attention to your gut reactions, your triggers, your biases, the things that make you defensive. Instead of shutting it down, well, get curious. Ask yourself, wait, where did I learn that? Do I still believe it? Does it line up with the values I just said were important to me? And no shame here. This process isn't about proving you're a perfectly enlightened and aligned person. It's about being honest. Growth doesn't come from being right. Growth comes from being real. And just like we grow as people, our values might evolve too. Maybe you grew up valuing obedience, but now you value critical thinking. Or maybe you used to see success as a large bank balance, but now it looks more like balance in your life. That's not hypocrisy, that's growth. That's evidence that you're paying attention and you're doing the work. We talk a lot about growth mindsets in terms of learning new skills or bouncing back from failure, but let's not forget, ethical growth matters just as much. Real alignment isn't about getting it perfect. It's about doing your best to bring your beliefs, values, and actions into harmony and being willing to shift when something doesn't quite fit anymore. Because at the end of the day, our integrity isn't just measured by what we say we believe. It's measured by how consistently we're willing to live those beliefs, even when it's hard. And even when it means changing. Okay, so let's say you've identified your core values, you've looked under the hood, done some realignment, maybe made a few uncomfortable realizations. That's huge. But now comes the question we all wrestle with. How do I actually live these values in the real world, where things are messy? People are complicated, and no one's handing out gold stars for moral clarity. Well, first, let's acknowledge something important. Living your values doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes. It doesn't mean you'll always know what to say or that every decision will feel clean and obvious. Sometimes living your values just means pausing for a beat before reacting. Sometimes it means apologizing when you do fall short. And sometimes, let's be honest, it means walking away from people or places that no longer align with who you're trying to be. And that's tough, because the world isn't set up to make values-based living easy. You might care deeply about fairness, but then you work in a system that rewards cutthroat competition. You might value honesty, but you live in a culture that prizes image over authenticity. You might value compassion, but you find yourself dealing with people who seem to have just zero interest in meeting you halfway. Heck, most of us have relatives like that. So how do we hold on to our values when we're surrounded by contradiction? Well, here's one strategy. Anchor yourself in daily practices that bring your values to life. That could be as simple as checking in with yourself at the end of the day. Did I act with integrity today? Did I choose compassion when I could have chosen judgment? Just things like this. These small reflections can keep us tethered to our intentions, even when the world feels chaotic. Also, don't go it alone. Try to surround yourself with people who challenge you, but who also support you and live their own values out loud. When you're feeling disheartened or disillusioned, those relationships can help you recalibrate or recharge. They remind you that you're not the only one trying to build a life that makes sense. And sometimes just knowing that is enough to keep going. And here's the thing. Living your values won't always be comfortable. And it definitely won't always be popular. But it will help you sleep better at night. It will help you show up more fully in your relationships. And it will help you build a life that isn't just reactive, but a life that's intentional, a life that's rooted in who you really are and who you're still becoming. So if you're out there doing your best to live with honesty, kindness, curiosity, or whatever values you've claimed as your own, well, keep going. Keep showing up. Keep realigning. It matters so much more than you might think. So here's what we've really been talking about today. We all inherit ideas about life, love, morality, success, and everything in between. It's not our fault we picked up some weird baggage along the way. I mean, some of us still instinctively say, bless you, after a sneeze, like we're warding off the plague, or maybe the person's soul really did just get expelled from their body. But those inherited beliefs, well, they're only the starting point. The real work, the meaningful, sometimes uncomfortable work, is figuring out which of those beliefs actually belong in the life we're trying to build. So here's your challenge for the week. Pick just one idea or belief that you hold. Something you think is true, important, or just the way things are. And then trace it back. Where did it come from? Who gave it to you? And most importantly, is it helping you live a life that reflects your actual values? Now, if it's not, you don't have to throw it out right away, but maybe gently set it on a shelf and see how things feel without it for a while. You know, this process isn't a one and done kind of thing. It's ongoing. It's definitely ongoing. And sometimes, it's kind of messy. Like most of the time, it's kind of messy. But it's also how we grow. It's how we move from unconscious reaction to conscious intention. And it's how we become people who aren't just talking about our values, but people who are actually living those values in real time, in real life. And that's really what I'm trying to do with the Coda Project. It's what the Coda Project is all about. It's not perfection, it's not dogma, certainly, but it's about alignment. It's about helping each other live in a way that reflects the kind of world we actually want to help create. So let's keep doing the work, one value check at a time. All right, thanks for joining me for this episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll keep you updated on the weekly live streams of Mythologizing the Bible. Also, if you subscribe for free over at thecodaproject.com, you'll start receiving my weekly resource called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief, once-a-week guide on a single core value. You can think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each of those age groups. So each weekly issue centers on a short reflection about the week's value, followed by discussion questions that are tailored for the different age groups, from kids to college students to adults, and then a simple take action step, like a small challenge or exercise you can do to put that value into practice. Especially for families, it's designed to be an easy way to ensure that at least once a week, you're making time to talk about morality, ethics, and core values. So if you're interested, please go subscribe for free at thecodaproject.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth.